Joining us in studio is Chief Sullivan from the Phoenix Police Department. Chief, thanks for doing this again.
Mike, great to see you today.
Let's talk, so much to get to about the Phoenix Police Department and changes over the past year. Let's do a little bit of a recap, if you don't mind. What have been some of the success stories in your mind as far as crime reduction, crime suppression, and what's Phoenix PD doing to reduce these big areas of crime?
You know, one of the things that I got here and I started talking to our folks about was let's get back to basics. Let's remember why we exist, and it's to prevent and control crime, provide justice for victims, and provide public safety to this community. And to do that, you know, we put together a crime plan. That crime plan was put together with my commanders, all the way down to the line level folks that gave input, and we really focused on crime. We kind of kicked off that effort with the Summer Shield, which was a warrant roundup where we picked up 600 violent folks around Phoenix that had warrants on them. It was an incredible success, and I think it really set the stage for what looks like is going to be a year that we're down in crime.
When you look at those people that are being arrested, and I've talked many, you know this better than I do, but you've got to have law enforcement that makes the arrests. You have to have prosecutors that are willing to vigorously prosecute the cases, and judges then that hand out sentences that are worthy of the crimes that have been committed. Do you feel like those three legs are working together right now?
I feel like it's always a work in progress. That's why it's so important for us to collaborate. Obviously, the judicial leg is independent. That's why it's so important for us to work with prosecutors and make sure that we bring them cases that they can prosecute to the fullest extent of the law.
And is that relationship, is that a good and improving relationship?
Yeah, I wouldn't say improving. It's always been good. Since I've been here, I've had an incredible relationship with Rachel.
So when you talk about the Summer Shield, you're looking at the most violent offenders. One of the things you talked about here was the crime reduction plan. It wasn't just where crimes were being committed, but times of day and really being data specific. How is that working?
You know, that's the way we need to do this job today, is especially in the challenges that we have with staffing. We have limited resources, so we have to put them where they need it. And that's why the crime plan focuses on those most active places and those people that are causing us problems, but then prohibited possessors, folks who shouldn't be carrying firearms, and we catch them carrying firearms. They need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and I know the county attorney is lockstep with me on that.
So the other part of that, and now that we saw with this horrible shooting in Maine, is somebody that had obvious signs that in hindsight that people questioning whether he should have had firearms in the first place. But you have units of officers that deal with mental health issues specifically. How is that unit working, and how does it work when it comes to firearms in some of these cases?
You know, I like to separate the two things. You know, when we talk about folks that are in crisis, we want to make sure that they get the help they need. But when it crosses over to public safety and criminal behavior, we need to make sure that they're also held accountable on the other side as well. Our crisis intervention team it's a model, really. We've had folks come from across the country to see what we're doing with our crisis intervention teams here in Phoenix.
One of the other things we were talking about before we went on the air is I referenced Denver, and that they have a unit of cops that are investigating, which aren't homicides but attempted homicides. These are violent offenders that didn't necessarily accomplish their goal. And I asked you about that, but you actually have a similar unit here at Phoenix PD.
Absolutely. We have a non-fatal shoot team. It's so important to get on those crimes before they do become a homicide, because unfortunately what we find is people who are willing to shoot people once might be willing to do it again.
And with those, I don't think people understand that when you get to the level of you're going to shoot somebody else, generally people don't jump from misdemeanor crimes to something as violent as a shooting. They usually have a fairly long criminal record, don't they?
Yeah, correct.
So how do you address, how is it being addressed in Phoenix, or maybe this is a prosecutor thing, when you are dealing with people that are such repeat offenders? They've been, so many times they've been through the system. Isn't that frustrating?
It's been a frustration that I've had throughout my almost 30 years in law enforcement. That's why it's so important to have those good communications with the prosecutor's office to make sure you're identifying those cases and make sure when you have the opportunity to prosecute those folks, whether it's at a state or federal level, that we take every opportunity to do that.
So what is, so we've talked about the crime reduction, you've talked about Summer Shield. What are some of the other things that Phoenix PD is doing to keep a lid on crime here? And are you seeing results that you're satisfied with?
I'm never satisfied, Mike. There's always going to be more work to do. I talk about continuous improvement all the time. We recently had an organized retail theft roundup. It resulted in clearing over 240 warrants. We arrested 64 people. And shockingly, some of those folks had guns that weren't supposed to. We recovered 5 firearms in that roundup. It's just something that we're doing here to make sure folks know that we take that serious here in Phoenix.
Is it just that? What is it that makes Phoenix different? Because you look at large metropolitan areas in California, San Francisco, L.A., and other major cities that have been dealing with really big retail theft rings and these smash and grabs. We haven't seen a bunch of that here, or as much of it here, it doesn't seem like. How has that been able to happen?
And while we certainly have our challenges, this is a very different environment. It's a very different environment from the police department's stance, and they take it very serious when we prosecute those folks. So we just need the criminal element to understand that if you do the crime, be ready to pay the price.
One of the other things you had talked to us about was use of force and a policy change and going to the public and getting input. Where are we with the use of force policy in Phoenix? Has it changed? And if it has changed, how has it been received by the officers?
So we've worked diligently, and it took a lot of work, and I engaged folks throughout the department. The policy is in final draft form. Training is being implemented. One of the things that I talk about all the time, we've, as a profession, have not done a good job. We do these big policy changes and don't train our folks. We're getting ready to train everybody in the department on the new policy before it rolls out. I can't hold somebody accountable to a policy that they haven't been trained on.
So then I've mentioned before the disadvantage to losing seasoned officers to retirement. And bringing on new officers, you lose a lot of experience. But is there a bit of an advantage there with the new officers coming in that they're going to be trained for the first time in a new policy like this?
And it's not new to the new folks, you
right?
Know? So absolutely, that's an advantage. But completely value our older officers. I'm one of them. We need them to stay around and help us keep Phoenix safe.
The big question still is about the Department of Justice and the investigation that happened long before you got here, but you were brought here because you've endured this before. Can you fill us in on where we are, where the city of Phoenix is with this DOJ investigation?
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know what we've done. We fully cooperated with this investigation to date, and just imagine the staff hours that it took to be able to give this information. Over almost 148,000 documents, 22,000 plus body-worn videos. That's not hours. Each of those videos could be anywhere from 5 minutes to 8 hours. Incredible volume that we've pulled and given them. We've facilitated 7 in-person visits, over 130 employee interviews, 200 hours of ride-alongs, and access to our department that the department needs to be able to do their investigation. What their investigation is going to show, I suspect it's going to be very critical of this department. I've told our folks be prepared for that, but it's not going to change what we do. We're going to continue to get better every single day. That's what I've been doing from day one, and we're going to continue doing that. So
if you can't guess what they're going to be critical of, but do you think there's going to be fair criticism in there of your department, or do you think it's going to be an unfair criticism?
Mike, we'll see. I can't make that comment until I see the report, and we'll see when the findings report comes out.
One of the unique things here in the Valley is that we've seen the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office endure a consent decree, and the sheriff is leaving, and part of the reason why he's leaving is some frustration with the fact that it's been over 10 years, there's been millions and millions of dollars spent, and they're still not out of the woods with this. When it comes to a consent decree like this, there's got to be a little bit of apprehension that if you're making these positive changes and you were brought here to make these changes, why would we need oversight? Why would we need someone to oversee your agency if you're making changes already in a positive direction?
The city has to make some very significant decisions that are going to impact not just the department, but the city for years as a result of this investigation.
Will you be a part of that decision-making process?
I've been talking to our decision makers, our city council, mayor, and city management about this since I got here.
Now, in other cities where there is a strong mayor system, the mayor generally makes the decision on this. In this case, we have a full city council that has to make this decision. Does the process work where the DOJ informs them of what their findings are, and then there's some kind of a meeting? What's the process? What's that going to look like?
You know, you'd have to ask the Department of Justice. I can go back to what it looks like in other places, but none of those have all been strong mayor forms of government. We expect to get very short notice and a report be put on our desk, and then we're going to have to assess it from there.
In general, generally speaking, I know it's hard for me to ask you questions about a report you haven't seen, but you and I have just gone over some of the positive changes you've made. Crime is going down. Staffing seems to be getting better in Phoenix. We seem to be moving in the right direction. If a consent decree is requested by the DOJ, generally speaking, would you push back and say, would you advise the city that you don't believe it's necessary?
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at this report. I'm going to be focused on doing the things that I've done since I've gotten here, where we can improve and how we can improve, whether that be we're working on this use of force policy. We're also working on what I would call the best de-escalation training in America right now. We're training our entire department on that. We brought in ABLE training, which is active bystandership by law enforcement, which is asking our folks to intervene and giving them the authority to intervene when they see misconduct. And then giving our folks the tools, the less lethal tools to be able to intervene, to make sure that we have good outcomes for our officers and for citizens.
So as a civilian completely, I'm just giving you the observation, looking at the study that was done within the Phoenix Police Department, 98% of the officers that responded say that they don't want the city to enter into this agreement. Many of them, up to over 40% of the officers, said they will either leave or seriously consider leaving if one is entered into, and what that would do to staffing. It scares me as a citizen of Phoenix, especially since you're here making these positive changes, that all of the growth and the good things that are happening could be halted, and a consent decree could actually do damage to the Phoenix Police Department instead of being an asset to it.
I understand that concern. I'm going to be focused on the things that I can control, and that's the things that the Phoenix Police Department does, and charting our path forward and continuing to get better every day.
In your experience, when it comes to these consent decrees, what is the timeline once a report is given out? Once a city council or mayor's office gets the report, what's the timeline for the decision-making process?
You know, it can be very long. I have colleagues back in Louisville who had a findings report dropped on them over 6 months ago, and last discussions I had with them, they hadn't entered into any sort of negotiations at this point.
One of the concerns of this consent decree is that the cost could be $250 million over 10 years at a minimum that would come out of public safety. Not just it would come out of your budget in the Phoenix Police Department, but also Phoenix Fire. There's bond issues that are up to try to add equipment and to add personnel and to make this a better place with public safety. How does that affect, if that comes out of your budget, how does that affect your ability to do your job?
I mean, and it doesn't just come out of the police department's budget. It comes out of all the city's budget. You know, we're the fire department, police department, we all come out of the same bucket. So it would cause challenges across the city.
So then, and I'm not trying to belabor this, but there's so many, in my mind, obviously you can tell where I stand on this issue. It really concerns me because, and I don't know if you've heard me say it, but you've come in here and we've talked on many occasions. You've been very transparent with me. You've talked about the changes you've made, some of them that have not necessarily been popular with some people in the department, but it seems like we're moving in the right direction. Crime is down. The policy changes seem to be positive in what people in the community wanted. So it seems like we're moving in the right direction. The idea that we would do something that would be so costly to the city that what we're seeing in Maricopa County that you can't say, okay, we're done with, that it's up to them, seems almost counterproductive, and it's a big concern. Do you understand that concern, and how do you respond to it when people beside me bring it to you?
I not only understand the concern, I have the same concern. You know, I'm here advocating for this police department and this city, and I want what's best for the police department and city. So I will continue to advocate in that way.
Well, Chief, I understand, it's tough. I know these are a lot of questions. You're trying to answer questions you don't have all the evidence or all of the information on. I appreciate the time today, and I hope moving forward, when this report hits, we can have another conversation when you have more of the information in front of you.
Absolutely.
All right, that's Chief Sullivan, Phoenix Police Department.